Boker Tov, Boker Tov. Today's Daf Chaf Hey in Nizir. Daf Chaf Hey. Continuing the discussion of yesterday. At the very end, Moshe, you were asking about chametz. If it's what do you do on Pesach? And I told you that there are two carbon minchas that have chametz. One is the carbon toda that has some of the breads are chametz, where most of them are matzah, and the other one I forgot the other one. The other one was the shtei alechna we bring on Shavuos. That's also made of chametz, which is a carbon seaboard, as opposed to carbon toda, which is an individual, a carbon for an individual. Anyway, those are the only two that have chametz. Everything else, all of the carbon mincha is made from matzah only. Now, so the Mishnah said that let's say a man, a person became, in the case the Mishnah was, let's say where a woman became a Nazira, and she says she set aside her karbanos, and then her husband broke her neder. So what do you do with the karbanos? So he said if they belong to her, that means that she had the right to designate them as karbanos, and she has a chatas ola and shlamim. The chatas you let die, the ola and shlamim you bring as karbanos. The Mishnah said if, let's say, she hadn't designated each one the money for particular karbanos, the money was still in. She set aside whatever, a few $100, $1,000 for all three karbanos. So they all are brought as an adava. They're all brought as an adava. So the Gemara asks, why is that? In other words, why? The fact is that in that money, in the $1,000, you have money for three karbanos. One of the karbanos is a chatas, and a chatas you have to destroy once it's set. Once it's set as a chatas, whether it's an animal, if it's an animal and you don't bring it anymore because you're not a nazir, so it's like chatas shemeisu ba'aleh, a chatas whose owner has died. So you kill the animal, you starve it to death. If it's money, you destroy the money, throw it in the Yam HaMelech. So over here, where the money is unspecified, it's $1,000 for all three karbanos. You didn't have three envelopes and say this money's for the chatas, this for those from the shlam. It was all together. It all goes from double. Why is that? It says the Gemara at the top of the page. V'halo demei chatas murafimbo. There's chatas money mixed in there, and chatas we know has to be destroyed. So how do you say you give it all as an adava? Meaning you bring it as an adava, like an ola that you bring as an adava. It all goes to as a free will offering to the base of mikdash. From that money they bring karbanos, etc. Amar Rav Yochanan, so Rachman says halachi ben nazir tzalach l'mosh misinai. There is no svara for it. It's simply halacha mosh misinai that if you have nazir money that a nazir set aside for his karbanos, and it's unspecified, and then the nazir is no longer a nazir, you don't bring the karbanos, it all goes for an adava. So halacha mosh misinai. We'll talk more about it at the end of the daf. For Shlokish Amar, it's a pasuk. Pasuk is when it comes to karbanos, says the chol nedreim chol bosim, for all their vows and their free will offerings. The Torah effectively said, most or neder, whatever's left over from a neder, if you made a vow and there's something left over, like in this case where you have money, but you can't bring the karbanos, hey, let it up. It should be for a free will offering, based on a pasuk. So Rav Yochanan, on the contrary, Rav Yochanan Damar Alochi, Salacha Mashvi Sinai, Ben Nazir. It's a special lacha when it comes to Nazir, that if he had extra money, you bring it as an adava. Therefore, I understand why stumen ein mefurash and low. Why? Because the halacha l'mashvi Sinai was only on most stumen. Most stumen means unspecified money. You didn't say this money is for chatas, this money's for all, this one is for shlam. It was all one big lump sum, and you've set it aside. So the halacha l'mashvi Sinai says in a case like that, it goes for an adava. But not mefurashin. If you had money, this money, $300 for the oil, $300 for the shlam, $300 for the chatas, then it doesn't apply. Then you have to the ola and shlamim you bring according to their rules. And we said the rules of an ola is a regular ola. You bring it, you burn it. Right? The shlamim is different because a regular shlam you eat for 2 days and a night, and this shlamim is only eaten for a day and a night. It's based on a pasuk. When it talks by Zevach Torah Shlomav, it says over there Shlomav because not only the Shlomim of a Toda, but also that of a Nazir. That's what we say in Karbanos every day. To say Karbanos, today we should have enough time to say all the Karbanos if we haven't said them yet. I say them earlier, but it says in the Yisrael Mekama that we say every day before Mizmor Shulchan Esbayis, it says HaToda ve'el Nazir, the Toda and the El Nazir, Kachim Kalim. Right, they're eaten for 1 day and a night, as opposed to regular shlam, which is eaten 2 days and a night. We say it every day. Hatoda be'el nazir. Look in the siddur, right? It's a mission of and parakeh of Zvachim that hatoda be'el nazir. The el nazir is what we're talking about. The shlam is eaten for 1 day and a night. So that's if it's mufarashin. But according to Rish Lakish, it says l'chol nidreim l'chol basam. I understand according to Rish Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan, it says halacha mashmi sinai. Lachmashin is only for most students if you have unspecified money, not if it's mufarashin. If it's specified, then you do each one what it's supposed to do. The old Shlom you bring in their manners, and the chatos you destroy. But according to Rish Lakish, it says l'chol nidreim l'chol basam. My wisdom, why talk about only unspecified a feeling for Russian, even if it's money that was specified? You said this is for those for Islam. Maybe it should also be given for an adava, and you don't say that the chatas money destroy and the only Islam you bring is kurbanos. Amarava mufurashin lo masasam. If it's mufurish, if these animals were specified, and you say, or the money was specified, this is chatas money, this is ola, this is shlamim, you can't say that you give it as an adava. Why? Kfar paska Tanei Rishmal already. Paskin already ruled based on the following price that we'll see that the chatos that you're supposed to do with the chatos on shlamim, as we've said before, they're supposed to be brought. The chatos you let die, and the other ones you bring. Where do we see this? It says like this. Tanei Rishmal says as follows: Rak kadeshecha. The pasuk says Rak kadeshecha sheyu lecha unidarecha. What is that pasuk? Pasuk says only your holy things asher yu lecha that you will have. What do you mean that you will have? It sounds like you have Kadashim now and you'll have more in the future. How do you have more in the future? If you have a Kadashim now, how does that make more in the future? Well, one way is by birth, right? Let's say you have a Chatas. A regular Chatas of an individual is a Kispa or a Sira. It's a female lamb or goat. Okay? You can have a baby. What do you do with the baby? You're mechuyev to bring a Chatas, right? You sin. You ate chayla by mistake. And okay, you bring a chatas. What you set aside the animal, but had a baby. Well, the baby is one of the 5 chatos that you let die. Vlad chatas is one of the ones that died. Another way is what's another way that you can have an animal now which produces something else, which is holy asher you l'chad you'll have afterwards. If you made a tmura, you said a rezu kazoo, right? Or you want to exchange. You're not supposed to. Let's say if an animal A, it's kachim, and you say, I want to take B instead. B is a nicer animal. I want B to take the place of A. The halach is that they're both kaddish, right? The first one, A is kaddish and B is also kaddish. In some cases, the tmur is brought as a carbon. In the case of the chatas, it's one of the 5 that you let die. Tmuras chatas and vlad chatas are of the 5, 3 of them you can't. It's the animal itself that you were makdish. That would be if the animal, let's say over shnas, it's past its year. You only bring it in its first year. If it's past its birthday, you can't bring it anymore. Or if the owner died or the owner had a kapar with another animal. But the 3 out of the 5, those are the animal itself, the chatas. The other 2 are animals that are produced by this kachim, either a baby in the case of a chatas, or in the case of an asham or an ola. Asham and ola cannot be a female. There's always a male. An asham and ola is male, unless it's an ola bird. A bird, there's no difference between male and female in terms of korbanos. There ain't Thomas when it comes to birds. When you bring birds, makes sense they're male or female. When it comes to animals, an ola is always a male, and an asham is only male, so they can't have a baby. That's pretty, can't have a baby if you're a male. I'm not talking about the garbage that goes on in the world today, but can't have a baby if you're a male. They still haven't figured that one out. But yeah, define as a woman, but they still haven't made, the woman who becomes a transgender, let's see her have a baby, Anyway, she could still, but the man who becomes a woman, right? The man who becomes a woman, he can't have a baby. Anyway, the point is then that, so what is an Ola and an Asham, what can they do? If you make a Tmura, I have an Ola A, or an Asham A, and I say I want B to be like A, so that's a Tmura. So that's what it means like the pasuk, Rak Kadashech Ashiyulacha. Not only the ones you have now, but that you will have Ashiyulacha, Unidarecha. What are we speaking about? The Vlade Kashim, Tmurasim Kasim. We're talking about the Vlad of Kashim in the case of a Chatas, or Tmurasim in the case of an Asham or an Ola or a Chatas, right? There's Tmurasim Kasim. Matakanas, what do you do with them? What do you do? The pasuk says, only these holy things and the ones that you will have that are that emanate from them, like a baby, a vlad, or a tmura. What do you do? Tisa, carry them, mubasa elamakam, bring them to the place Asher Yivcha, which of course means the holy temple, the base of Mikdash. That's what you're supposed to do. Yachol. So I might think that this is all part of the brush for Bishmal. Yachol, the base of Mikdash. I might think, okay, you bring them to the base of Mikdash. The yimnemehem mayim and basam. and starve them. You hold back from them, refrain from them any water or food. They should die. Maybe that's the halacha with them, with all these animals. That if you have a vlad or a tmura of a kosher of any carbon, you have to let them die. Tamalomar, the pasuk goes on. No, the olas you make basar dam. You bring them, you serve them, you sacrifice them on the base of mikdash. The same way that you do with a regular ola, the burnt sacrifice. The same thing you do with the tmura. Same thing you do with whatever you do with the shlamim, normal shlamim, which is you eat it for 2 days and a night, and it's eaten for scharim, and it can be eaten anywhere in your shalim, not after in the base of mikdash. No, b'vadeyim. In other words, the tmura of an ola or a shlamim, you bring it as a carbon, and the same thing, with the shlamim, it could be a child also, because a shlamim could be a male or a female. A regular shlam could be a male or a female. So if it's a female animal, it could have a baby. So the same way you do with an ola, you bring the tmura. And the same thing you do with the shlamim. If you had a tmura of a shlam or the baby of a shlam, you do the same thing. So I might think if that's the case, he says, then it says, the same thing you do your olas, you bring olas, and the same thing with shlam. I might think the same thing with chatas and tmura asham also, you bring this as karbanos. Talmud rak, rak is an exclusion. Only these. It says rak karashecha asheyu lecha. Only these and their offspring. Let's call it the offspring, either the babies or the tmura. You bring them to the base of mikdash and you bring them as a carbon. Only these, excluding only these, not chatos and asham. Divrei Rabbi Shmuel. This is Rabbi Shmuel says. So before we analyze Rabbi Shmuel, because I just said before that these are among the 5 chatos that you let die, which is halacha mashmi Sinai. Rabbi Shmuel seems to be learning them from this pasuk. So the Gemara is going to deal with that now. Rabbi Kiva Omer and Rabbi Kiva says, no, I don't agree with you, Rabbi Shmuel. You don't need that pasuk. Rabbi Omer, the pasuk says, Ashamhu. It is a guilt offering. Ashamhu. It should stay always in Asham. Now, it's not clear how Rabbi Kiva is different from Rabbi Shmuel. We're talking here about if you have a vlad or a tmura of an animal, what do you do with it? So Rabbi Shmuel's rasha was, if it's an olah shlamim, you bring it in the normal fashion. If it's a chasas and asham, no, that's excluded from the word rock. What does Rabbi Kiva come along to say? That if it's an asham, it stays an asham. What does that have to do? So the Gemara is not clear at this point. The Gemara is going to explain Rabbi Kiva later on. Ktani, let's go back to Rabbi Shmuel. Yachol, we learned Yachol Yom Beis Mikdash. I might think you bring Beis Mikdash be in the Me'amaz, and I might think these animals, either a vlad of kachim. In the case of vlad, could be a vlad of a chatos, a vlad of a shlamim, or if it's a tmura of any of them, I might think you bring them up to the base of Mikdash that they should die. The tmura of an olah shlamim. Tamalom vasisol sechad. No, you bring it as a carbon. Okay, says Gemara Amai. Why would you think that you let it die? Havlad chatas hu the Gemir in Bamisa. In other words, what's with this famous case where you have 5 animals, 5 kinds of chatos that you let die, which goes against our logic, right? We know that the Torah objects to cruelty to animals, right? There's a mitzvah doraisa. It's not one of the 613, but it's a doraisa that tsar balachayim is forbidden. You're not allowed to hurt or maim animals in any way. You can't cause them to suffer. But this is a special halach in the Torah. These 5, you let them die, you starve them. Among them are the vlad of a chatas. If a chatas had a baby, you have a chatas animal, you've got to bring it as a carbon. Meanwhile, it had a baby. The baby is kadosh, just like its mother. What do you do with it? Can't bring it as a carbon because you don't have a sin for that. You have a sin for the mother. The sin for the sin that you have is going to be atoned for by bringing the mother. But the vlad, what do you do with that? You let it die. So the question over here is, what do you mean? The pasuk says these animals that you have, if they had a tmura or a vlad, you bring them as a carbon, right? Why? Because it says, you might think, well, you bring it up, you let it die. Kamashmula, no, that you bring it you bring it as a carbon, you sacrifice it. What do you mean? Why would you think that you destroy these animals? The whole concept that you destroy the animal is by a vlad chatasu the gemir ba. That's where we have a lachal mashmi Sinai. We don't have a lachal mashmi Sinai that the vlad of a shlamim you let die. Why would I think that you let that die? Amai havlad chatasu the gemir ba. We owe the misa. The misa that you're supposed to let the animal die is only vlad chatas, not other ones. The Gemara says, no, I still need the pasuk. You're right. There is a halacha mishmisin on vlad chatas, but ilav kraf. It wouldn't be for the pasuk having men of vlad chatas b'chol makom. I might think, listen, the halacha mishmisin is that the vlad chatas you let it die wherever it is. You're in Tel Aviv, and you set aside your animal over here, and it had a baby. You have to bring a carbon vlad chatas. I might think, okay, you let it die right in Tel Aviv. Vlad a kachim, but the vladim of other kachim, like the vlad of a shlomim, the base of Chira. Maybe you have to take that to the base of Mikdash and let it die there. Kamash Mulan to low. Okay, that's what you would think. Right? Why would you think you have to take it to the base of Mikdash? Like what? The vlad of Achatas, you let it die. Why would you think you have to take it to the base of Mikdash? So the Farshim say that you might think you have to take it to the base of Mikdash because if you let the animals die wherever they are, people might come to think that they're not really kachim. You just let them die, whatever. They died in the street like any other animal. And they won't treat them properly. They won't treat it respectfully. So that's why you might have such a havmina kamash mandalos. In other words, what we're saying, there really is vlad chatas is halacha mashmi sinai. But I might think that the other kabbanas also, the vlad or the tmura also should you let them die? Kamash malan. And the difference only is that vlad chatas you let die wherever it is, and the vlad, the other ones, say a shlomim or the tmura of the other ones, you bring to the base of Mikdash and let them die there. Kamashman, we don't say that. Okay. Tani yachal af vlad chatos tmuras asham kain. See, it said, what do you say? That Ola and Shlomim, it says if you have a tmura of an Ola or the tmura of a Shlomim or the vlad of a Shlomim, you bring it as a carbon. It's holy, you bring it as a carbon. I might think the same thing would be by chatos and asham. That's what he says. He says, no, rock, only Ola and Shlomim, not chatas and asham. Chatas and asham are not brought. Yachalaf vlad chatas asham. Why would you think that? The Gemara says. We're at the second line now on Chaf Hey and Beis. Tell you yachalaf vlad chatas and tmuras asham. And I might think that the vlad chatas and the tmur of an asham. Again, an asham cannot have a vlad because it's a male. But the vlad chatas or the tmur of a chatas or the tmur of an asham, I might think they also are brought as a carbon. Tamaloma rock. What do we need a pasuk for? Lamali kra. What are the pasuk? Tachzik amirla. We know it's halacha mashmi sinai that the vlad chatas. So one thing you thought that maybe a tmura, the tmura and vlad of a ola and shlom should also be destroyed. Kamash one. No, we don't say it. You bring it as a carbon. Asisa l'secha basam adam. But why would you think that the chatas and asham, the vlad of a chatas or the tmura of an asham, should be brought? And in the pasuk, no rock. No, only ola and shlomim are brought, but the other ones are not. What are we in the pasuk for? We have halacha mashmi sinai. Vlad chatos l'misas, and we know vlad chatos is supposed to be put down. Let's call it. It's supposed to be put down. It's supposed to be destroyed. This is hachanami. You're right. It is halacha mashmi sinai. But krala asham huda asa. The pasuk is to tell me that an asham, if you have a tmur of an asham, that you don't bring it as a carbon, but rather, as we said, you let it. You let it graze, get a balmum, and you change its money, and you change its value into you redeem it, and you bring carbon ola, let's say, with it. This is more asham, but that's also part of the halacha which we've seen about the asham. In other words, what's the kol she'ilu b'chatas mesa? There's the halacha mashmi says that if there's 5 chatos that you let them die, one of them being a vlad chatos, if it had a baby, and any of the five that apply by asham you don't let it die, but rather you let it graze, you transfer it for grazing, you give it to the shepherd, wait till it gets a moment, and you bring a korban with it. Now an asham doesn't have all 5, because an asham can't have as a baby, as I said, because an asham is always a male. But the other ones it does have. You can have the tmur of an asham. You can have an asham whose time has passed. It's, let's say, supposed to be in certain ashams has to be within a year, and now it's past its birthday, so you can't bring it anymore. Or the owner died, or the owner was atoned for by another one, like he lost the animal, brought another one in his place, and then they found the original one. So those 4 you can have. So asham nami hilchasik amirla. So what do you mean you need it for asham? Chatas we know is lach mashmi sinai chatas vlad chatas l'misazel. Asham also, whatever by chatas you let die, by asham you let it graze. It goes for grazing, and you redeem it and bring an asham with it, and you bring an ola with it. Whenever by a chatas you let die, but asham roa, it goes out and grazes. Ella here's what the question was. If it would be, you're right. Allah Mashmi says that Blat Chatos dies, just like the other kinds of Chatos that let die. And Asham also, if any of those things happen to an Asham, the four, not the having a baby, can't have a baby, but the other ones apply. Again, either that it was a tumor of an Asham, or it's past its year, or it's the owner died or was already atoned for by another carbon. But based on that, Allah Mashmi said, that's the halacha. You're supposed to let the Chatos die, and you're supposed to let the Asham graze. The akrave, but let's say you didn't. You bought it as a carbon anyway. Lo l'chayv, you're not chayv for that. Below klum, it's like, okay, you're supposed to let it die. But let's say you said, I can't let the animal die. I have Rahmanasan, I'm going to bring it as a carbon. I'll sacrifice it. There's no punishment involved. Kamash B'lan Kra. The pasuk says no. The pasuk says al sisal secha rock. Only these. Only rock. Only these. This Ola and Shlamim you bring as a carbon. The other ones you cannot. Kamash B'lan Kra. The makavle karmel essay. You have an essay. What's the essay? Because it's a lavabo machal essay. It's an essay. The pasuk says rock. Only these you should bring. Right? The might. These you should bring the Ola and the Shlamim. The other ones you don't. You don't bring a chatas and a asham that you're supposed to let it die, or you're supposed to let the asham graze. You don't bring them as a carbon. And if you did, you're over on the assay, because it's a lava, a los assay, a negative thing. Don't bring these, which is learned out from a positive. These you do bring. You bring Ola and Shlamim. You don't bring chatas and asham. That's good. You're over on an assay, so you're punished for that. God punishes you for being over an assay. You don't get malchus bezdin, but you're punished for that. Okay, so that's the drasha, and we have Rabbi Shmuel. Now, Rabbi Kiva, though, didn't make sense, right? Rabbi Kiva said he disagreed with Rabbi Shmuel. So we said Rabbi Shmuel really agrees, halacha Moshe Sinai, about chatas and asham. But the chiddush of the psukim was about the Ola and the Shlamim, that you do bring those as karbanos, and the chatas and asham, if you bring them, you're over on an asay, if you don't let them die or let them graze. Rabbi Kiva says you don't need a pasuk. Rabbi Omer asham hu, it's an asham babi asay. Lamali kro, what need a pasuk? Gemara Gemila. We already have halacha Moshe Sinai. Again, doesn't Rabbi Kiva agree with the halacha Moshe Sinai that what kosher b'chatas meisa b'asham roa? Not only by chatas let it die, but the halacha Sinai says that the 5 chatos you let die, and of the 5 chatos you let die, the 4 of them that apply to an asham, they have to be transferred for grazing. And when they get a mum, you can redeem them. A carbon cannot. Something has kedushas dam, you could redeem without a mum. But something that has kedushas aguf, you have to wait till it gets a mum, and then you can redeem it. So, so Kiva also knows that it's supposed to be transferred for grazing. What do you mean that pasuk says Asham hu? What do you need a pasuk for? It stays in Asham. So you're right. He also the pasuk is the Rav for Rav's halacha. What does he say? Asham shenitik riya, an Asham that has been transferred for grazing. Again, what would be an example of an Asham that's transferred for grazing? Either a tmuras asham, if you had an asham A and you said I want B to be like A, so now B is a tmuras asham, or as we said, if asham got past its birthday, you can't bring it anymore, or the owner died, or the owner had an atonement already. So asham shenitlik, so now it's been transferred for grazing, right? You said okay, now the asham you can't bring it as a carbon, transfer for grazing. V'shachtu l'shem ola. Now what are you going to do with this asham? You're going to let it graze. You're going to let it get a balmum. Then you're going to redeem it for money, or transfer its kedusha onto another animal. You'll bring as an ola. You'll bring an ola as a free will offering anytime. That's what you're going to do, l'shem ola. So let's say it was transferred for grazing, but it didn't get a mum yet. You didn't get a mum and you didn't redeem. You just transferred it for grazing. As soon as you did it, b'shach l'shem ola is kosher, because once you transfer it for grazing, let's so to speak, it gets transformed from an asham into an ola, even though you didn't yet redeem it. That's the halacha. Time at the nitik. The only reason is why? Because you already transferred it for grazing. Hello, Nick, if you didn't transfer it for grazing, low. The pasuk says who bavi asuyeh. So Tosfos goes into arichas because the lashon of Rabbi Kiva to Rabbi Shmuel was ain't tzarchin in the pasuk for that, as if he's giving a reason for the same thing. Rabbi Shmuel explained why the chatas and asham you can't bring, even if you wanted to bring it as a carbon. The chatas and asham transfers the let's say the vlad chatas or the tmuras asham. You can bring it even if you want to, based on the pasuk brak, only Ola and Shlamim, and excludes chatas and asham, that there's an asay if you bring it. Rabbi Kiva is saying it's but Rabbi Kiva is not really talking about Rabbi Shmuel's halacha now. He's saying a different thing. He's saying once you transfer it, then once you transfer an asham into grazing, then if you brought it as an Ola, it's okay. But if you didn't transfer it yet, let's say you just had the asham and you can't bring it for some reason, the owner died, and now they shechted as an ola. That's no good. That's what he means. Time of the nitik. Hello nitik lo. The pasuk says who? Asham who? Who bafi asu. It stays an asham until you change its name. Until you have to do an action. You have to take the asham, transfer it for grazing, give it to the shepherd, and let it graze for as long as it wants to until it gets a mum, and at that point you can redeem it. But once you transferred it, even if you brought it as an ola then before it got a mum and before you redeemed it, that's also okay. But if you didn't transfer it, no, then it's an asham, and then that's not good. That's what Rabbi Kiva is teaching us that halacha. Amar Mar, 2 lines from the bottom of the page in the Gemara. Amar Mar. Halacha hi ben Nazir. We said that's what we started with today. If you look at the beginning of today's daf, right, we were talking about if a Nazir had money that he set aside, a lump sum of money that was not specified. This is chatas, this is old as a shlom. It's just one big pile of money, and now he can't bring it anymore. He's longer a Nazir. The woman lost her Nazir, said her husband broke her netter, or the owner died, as we said, or the son. He made his son. We learned yesterday the son was a kid under bar mitzvah, and he made his son a Nazir, and the son refused. He objected, so he's long gone now. So what do you do with the karbanos, with the money? Well, if it's unspecified, you give it as an adava. Why? There's chatas money in there too. Chatas we just been discussing has to be destroyed. If it's money, you destroy it in the Amamelech. If it's an animal, you let it die. So Rabbi Yochanan says, halacha lo shmisina by Nazir. Special halacha that if you have unspecified money, even though some of the money was supposed to go for a chatos, right? It was supposed to go for a chatos, but if you have unspecified money, it all goes for an adava now. Special halacha. That's what we're dealing with now. 2 lines from the bottom of Chafei and Beis. Omar Mar. Halachi ben Nazir salach mashmisina by Nazir. That's what you do. Take more of a suleka. Only by Nazir, you think that's the halacha, not by other cases. But Tanya, Bishar Chayvekinen. There are many cases where you bring a couple of birds. In some cases, you bring a couple of birds because that's the halacha. Let's say by Zava, who's purified, she brings 2 birds. One's achatas, one's an all. But there's other cases where the birds are for poor people, like let's say a mitzora, who can't afford an animal, or you can't afford an animal, so you can bring 2 birds, right? Or you can bring, if you can, you bring a flower offering in some cases. The beginning in Perak Hey of Vayikra talks about korban ola v'yorah. Korban ola v'yorah means it goes up and down depending on your financial situation. So there's a case of, let's say you denied testimony. You didn't want to testify. You said, I don't know the testimony, and you lied about it. Or you made a shvuah and you lied about that, right? Or you went into the Beis Mikdash and you were tamei. You forgot that you were tamei and you went into the Beis Mikdash. All those cases, you're chayav a korban ola v'yorah. Meaning, if you're wealthy, you can bring an animal, you bring an animal. If you're less wealthy, you bring a couple of birds. If you're less wealthy, you bring a korban mincha. So that's called Kenan, the nest of birds. Shar Chayve Kenan says the Mishnah, the Bryce over there, Shabbatorah, Shefrishu, we're now in Chavav Manal. Shefrishu Mosikaneim, they're chayiv, and they set aside money. These people who were chayiv, let's say a couple of birds, they were poor and they had to bring a couple of birds. Now they came into some money. Ratza lahavi ben chatz shefishmos. They set aside some money. Ratza lahavi ben chatas behema yavi. If they want to now take the money and set aside and bring a chatas behema with it, they add some money to it, they could do it. Ola's behema, if they want to bring an ola with it, yavi. In other words, if they're chayiv and chatas or an ola before, and they were going to bring that as birds, and now they came into some money. Top Rashi in the page says Shiur, they became wealthy. Could go mitzora. Im chayv chatas v'olahein. Im ras losif aleim. They want to add some more money to lavi chatas behema yavi. Okay, you can do that. Mace, okay, let's say in that case, though, you had this unspecified money of birds, right? You had set aside money for birds. It says over there, okay, if you became wealthy, you can add some money and bring animals with it. Let's say, though, he died now. Mace, vayula mostumen. In that case, where you had chayiv birds, set up birds, we're not talking about a nazir now. We already said by nazir, that's the halacha. If you have unspecified money and you die, or you're not nazir anymore, you bring in a double with it. So the Gemara is saying it's only by nazir. Here we have it by other cases too. When you chayav a couple of birds and you died, you had some unspecified money, you put in a double, also in a double. So here it's not only by nazir that halacha applies, but Rabbi Yochanan said halacha ibn nazir. It's special halacha by nazir. Okay, then first we ask what about Reish Lakish also. Reish Lakish disagrees, but it's halacha ibn nazir. Here you see it's not only by nazir. wherever you have a couple of birds and you set aside some money for the two birds. You didn't say which bird is, this money's for the Ola bird, this money's for the Chattas bird. You just said, okay, here's $100 for a couple of birds. And the guy died. So you bring it for Nadava. So you see that you bring it even you see there's other cases that go with Nadava, not just Nazir. It's not just halacha which is by Nazir. So the Gemara's answer is no. Tana Nazir b'chayve kinan the damale. You talk about a Nazir and other cases where you chayav a pair of birds which are like Nazir. Now, does Nazir bring birds or brings animals? We learned before it brings animals, except, so Rashi says here, or the Mefarish Rashi says, the Nazir Tameh also brings birds. Remember Nazir Tameh? Let's say we went to a funeral or somebody died in the room with him, and he's Tameh. He brings two birds, Chattas and Ola, and he has to bring a Korban Asham, right, to purify himself, which is an animal. So he says, so Rashi says here in the fourth line of Rashi, the Nazir Tameh also may be Kenan. Behold, the Kaimul and Gabi Nazir Tameh. Since we say by Nazir Tameh that he brings birds, Amir Gabi Nazir Torah also that if it's unspecified money and he dies, in other words, according to Rashi, the basic idea is based on birds, right? Birds, meaning it's Nazir's birds and a Nazir that was also Sinai. And since Nazir's birds, if they were based on unspecified money, then the unspecified money was set aside for these birds of a Nazir Tameh. So he said Nazir Torah also, his unspecified money is there. And the male will say anything which is similar to that. Just like Nazir's birds, unspecified, and the guy dies, you bring in a dava. So other birds also. So he says whenever it's birds. So according to this, it's Tana Nazir b'chayve kinan de damule. It's a Nazir and other requirements. A Nazir sometimes has a requirement to bring birds if he became Tameh. And that's where the halacha machine Sinai was based on. And we said, okay, since a Nazir Tameh has to bring birds, and his unspecified money, the halacha machine Sinai says you bring it as an adava. So all the kabbanis of Nazir also, if it's unspecified, but it's not just birds. It's just the birds was learned out from the Nazir bird and other kabbanis of a Nazir. But we apply it to all birds then. Whenever you have a chiyuv of a bird, so he says, Tana Nazir b'chayve kinan de damale. That's how Rashi learns. It's because by Nazir Tameh, he brings birds, and that's the halach mishvisa that you bring it as an adav if the guy dies. The same thing by other kabbanis of a Nazir Tahor, and then we'll apply it to other birds also because the source was Nazir Tameh's birds. Tosfos learns in the second Tosfos a little bit differently. That's what the right. It has in terms of my dummy lenazir. So he says that's halacha. Halacha Mishmisiai was not just halachi b'nazir, but a nazir and anything like that. So how are they comparable to nazir? Shemavian al davarachet shnei karbanos. From a nazir al naziruso, yoledes mitzor shemaviim gam heim al davarachet beis karbanos. In other words, in what sense are they like nazir? Not like Rashi says. Well, Rashi says that the basic idea was it's birds, right? It's birds of a nazir. A Nazir Tameh brings birds. Okay, so other things like a Nazir also, and all other birds. The Lach Machine sign was by Nazir birds, so he applied to other birds too. But why? Well, just because they're birds? Tosfos says no. It's anything where you have to bring it based on a chiyuv to bring. You did one action for which you have to bring these two birds, a chattas and an ola. Meaning, as I'm saying, as opposed to when a person just says, "I want to bring one bird as an ola." Okay, you bring one bird as an ola. But if there's certain keys like a mitzorah or a yoledes, or in this case a nazir, if you're a nazir tameh, you became tameh. You're a nazir, and you went to the funeral, or somebody died and you're in the room. So that one thing causes you to bring two birds. You can't say I want to bring one bird. That's a chiyuv. You have to bring two birds. One action causes a chiyuv of two birds. The asham is also the third thing. Also, the asham you have to bring to purify yourself. Fine, but the chattas and the ola is based on one action. So he says that's what it means. Tana Nazir b'chol d'dami, a Nazir where one action causes you to bring two birds, like action she gave birth, or the person was a mitzorah. They bring on al davar echad. They bring two karbanos, as opposed to ulapuke back in the Gemara in the fourth line of the Gemara. Ulapuke maratayim, to exclude from this what we learn in a brisa, a case where you didn't have a chiyuv for two animals or two animals based on one thing. What is an example of that? Let's say a man was chayav to bring a chattas. He ate chayla by mistake, and he didn't bring a chattas. Vamran, he said, you know what? I'd also let him bring an ola. I like to bring as a donation. I like to bring an ola. So he had an obligation to bring a chatas for a sin, and he said, I'd like to bring an ola. And he set aside some money. This is for my obligation. Which obligation? Right? He first had an obligation to bring a chatas because he sinned. And then he says, I'm going to bring an ola also. I vow I'm going to bring an ola. Now he has two obligations, right? The chatas for the sin and the ola for his donation. And now he says, this money is for my chova. You know what? You don't know what it's for. Ratzalavi, but in chatas, if he wants to bring a chatas with it, behema, lo yav, he can't, because maybe it's for the ola. Oh, if he didn't specify. Ola's behema, let's say he wants to bring an ola's behema with it, lo yavi can't bring it also, because maybe the money was for the chatas. Mace, let's say he died, let's say he died, and the money was still unspecified at the time of death. You don't say, like we're saying over here, that Mo is stumin. If you have unspecified money and the guy dies, it goes for an adava. You don't say that. No, you destroy that money. Why? Because part of this money was chatas money, and chatas money you can't use for anything else. It's got to be destroyed, just like the animals destroyed. Same thing. So why? Because this case, it wasn't one sin or one action that required two karbanos. They were two separate things. He was chayav chatas for having a sin, and then he said, "I like to bring an ola too." Okay, I got two obligations. Then he says, this money is for my obligation. Which obligation? We don't know. We don't. And then he dies. So maybe it's for the chatos. Maybe so you have to destroy the money because maybe it's chatos money. So you don't say yiplun adava. Oh, that's what we're saying. When Yochanan started off the daf today by saying, if a nazir has unspecified money and he or she is no longer a nazir, so you can't bring the gemaras. What do? It goes for an adava. Why should it go for an adava? There's chatos money in there too. Halacha mashmi sinai. Oh, wait a minute, but is that only by Nazir? We said, no, it's Nazir v'chol the dummy. And like Tosas explained, Tosas is a little bit more Sephardic than Rashi, that it's what do you mean similar? That one action in the case of a Nazir becoming Tameh causes you to bring two birds, two animals. Or in the case, let's say a Yoleta, she gave birth, she has to bring two. But Sorah has to bring two, as opposed to two different actions that cause you to bring two korbanos. Like where I'm chayav chatos for a sin, and then I want to bring an ola on my own. Those are two separate things. In that case, if the money was then specified and the owner died, you don't say that it goes for an adava, but rather the money is destroyed. All right, tomorrow's daf is daf chavav. Actually, on the tape, you'll see that it starts already from Amar Mar, from the last piece that we just had about halacha ibn Nazir, such there, and it's a very short daf. And tomorrow's daf goes really into Chav Zayin. And Chav Beis and Chav Zayin go. It's one dialogue. So on the podcast, it'll take you to the top of Chav Zayin Amud Beis, the second line on the Chav Zayin Amud Beis, and that's where we'll start a Mitzvah Shem on Sunday. It's a very short daf, and the Chav Zayin Malach is really short. It's really just an answer to the question raised on Chav Amud Beis. So on Sunday morning, Mitzvah Shem, we will pick it up from Chav Zayin Amud Beis, the top there, the second line. Shabbat Shalom l'kulam.